Hi, and welcome to A Time to Thrill. I'm your host, Amy Austin. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2023. I am happy to start this year with an interview with USA Today bestselling author Grace Callaway. Grace writes historical romance and okay, I love Grace. We met at a retreat years ago in Oceanside, the same one where I met Cora Seaton and other people I've interviewed on the podcast. And Grace has the most, or well, to me, has the most fascinating background. Before turning to writing romance full time, she was a clinical psychologist. And well, okay, most if that's not if that's not the most fascinating profession to have before delving into writing, I don't know what is. When I met her, I was sitting next to each other. I remember this big wooden table, and I was just so fascinated by the idea that her day job, and she was still practicing part time back then, was, being a psychologist and, having those sessions and helping people talk through whatever it is that they talk through. And I just, it seems I took one psychology class in college. I think it was called The Psychology of Women. And I didn't enjoy it. I I like the idea of the science of human brain, human behavior, but it's not something I've read about to any great degree. No doubt to my detriment, but that's a different conversation. So I just find it utterly fascinating that she has that because I spend a lot of time thinking about characters and thinking about, their motivations and their goals and, how they move through space and time. But I always feel like Grace has these additional tools to achieve that. And anyway, so Grace and I actually went on a different retreat years later, and some island. Oh my god, I can't remember the name of the island. I want to say it was like Galveston. Oh no, I'm not good. That's the wrong island. Some island somewhere near Houston, in Texas, where people drove on the beach. Pickup trucks on the beach. I think. Okay, I have no space in my head for it. It was like the oddest thing I think I've ever seen. But interestingly, we were walking on the beach one day talking about birds. I don't like birds. She doesn't much like birds. And the moment we came back from our walk on the beach, there was a bird in the beach house. And I was like, I cannot believe I feel like we summoned that bird. Anyway, so Grace is such an interesting person. She has a super interesting life and a super interesting perspective on writing and writing historical, which, as you know, I've said when I've interviewed other historical authors, maybe Tamara Gill, I think it's hard. I think I don't understand it. I can't imagine a job that required research. Um, I just want to write a book. I don't want to do any more work than that. Writing the book is hard enough without throwing in like reticules and carriages. I don't know. I think a reticule's a bag. God, I should probably look that up. Anyway, so without further ado, here is my lovely conversation with USA Today bestselling author Grace Callaway. Hi, this is Amy Austin, and welcome to A Time to Thrill. This month, I am delighted to welcome USA Today bestselling author Grace Callaway. Hi, Grace.
Hey, Amy.
How
So
are
happy
you?
to be here.
I know. I'm very, very,
Great.
very excited to talk to you because the last time I saw you was before the pandemic.
Oh my God, it feels like time has just kind of stood still, right?
Yes. So I will say this. I think the last time I remember seeing you, we were walking on the beach on the name of the island. I still can't remember. It's, I think, the one in Texas. Um,
Yes, Galveston. Galveston?
okay. Yeah, I believe it's Galveston Island, but I just don't want to be wrong. I just can't remember. I remember us being on
Not, I'm definitely not sure either. So,
we took a boat and went to the island, then we took a boat back, and I have
right.
pictures. But the weirdest thing I still think about this all the time. So we're walking on the beach and people are driving on the beach in pickups. And I've never seen anything like it before again. And it still strikes me one of the oddest things ever. But that's the last time I saw you. So how are you?
I'm still here.
I
No,
know
it's
that's the best part.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been, I think for like a lot of people, it's been a rough few years,
Hmm.
but it seems like things are kind of, you know,
Turning
opening up again. Yeah, turning around. So, yeah, I'm so happy we get to connect. It just seems like that's the part I really miss is connecting with, writers at conferences and retreats.
I
Um,
yeah, it's been hard. It's been isolating. So I'm gonna ask you this: Have you been you you're fairly prolific in a very paced manner, which I
Yeah.
appreciate.
That is such a polite way of saying you write slow, but but you do release things.
Your release schedule I have found to be very consistent. I am not.
That is
I'm like
true.
a lot of books, no books. So
Yeah.
uh, I'm not
Yeah.
that. But did you write during 2020?
Oh yeah, so my usual release schedule is pretty much 2 books a year.
Hmm.
That's how I've basically always been. And I think at the beginning of the pandemic, it was actually I felt very creative, which is,
Wow.
it was just, yeah, I mean, it was hard. It was hard when, during the initial lockdown and there was like no school. That was very difficult because I have
Yes.
a child who needs a lot of attention.
Hmm.
But, I just felt like actually it, I just felt very creative. So I think in like 2020, yeah, I was still releasing like 2 books a year. So yeah, no, I've kept up with the writing really. Like I think just like now I'm starting to feel a little bit of the effects of everything,
Hmm.
sort of the cumulative stuff. Um, but yeah, no, I'm pretty steady, really. I will only release 1 book this year, but that was planned because my next book just takes a lot of research.
Hmm.
So I have a little longer gap between this book and the my
Okay.
last book and the one that's upcoming. But
Okay.
no, yeah, I've kept up with writing. Yeah.
Wow. So I have to ask you this because so for listeners who don't know, Grace writes historical. I Every time I talk to a historical writer, my head explodes because honestly, like it seems like a lot of work. And I writing itself is already a lot of work, and then adding research just makes my head tired. Right now, I'm like, oh my god, I think I'm gonna get a headache. So, do you enjoy the research aspect of historical writing?
Oh, I love doing research. It really satisfies like the nerdy part of me.
Hmm.
So no, that's actually one of my favorite things to do. I think that's actually why I write historical. So, I mean, in general, I mean, I like reading a lot of books about history.
Hmm.
And in a way, I mean, I like fashion and all of that. I think people really associate historical romance with like, the beautiful clothing and
Hmm.
all that, which I do love and I do try to get right. But I'm also really interested in the general sort of, the historical events and just kind of zeitgeist of the times. And
Hmm.
um, a lot of people say I write kind of modern historicals, which is not untrue. I mean, it's a deliberate thing on my part, but I just see actually really there's a lot of kind of parallels, things that were going on. I write a lot in, it's in Britain and kind of industrial revolution, like
Hmm.
Regency, Victorian, just a lot of the issues, kind of still permeate our culture today.
I
Like you
think
just see a
so.
lot of parallels, right? So
I can't
that's
see how
always
you
very
wouldn't
interesting to
because
me.
humans are so human and they're so consistent in their behavior and misbehavior. I'll say that.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, it's really true. So I find that part like completely fascinating. So I love doing the research. I mean, it takes, it does take more time though,
it does take
I
time.
think to write a to write a book. Although don't you have to do research? I mean, you do like all these legal, you must have to do a lot of
Well, I went to law
research to
school,
get all
and
that right.
so okay. So yes, I found it's actually true. I do research, but I just have to look up things that I don't remember. Like
Well,
recently.
that's research too. I mean, like I went, I'm a psychologist in
Right.
my other life. So I still have to like research if I'm writing, about a mental illness to make sure, right? Like, so you
Yeah.
still have to make sure you get it
Right.
right.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
part I do. So, but it's very, I can start with the base. So recently I was researching immunity, like the ways one can have immunity from prosecution by testifying or offering evidence on, behalf of the prosecution. And I just couldn't remember
Interesting.
the immunity and specifically the rules for the state where the books are taking place. So I did look it up, but it was like 20 minutes. And I already knew no, I had a base of information. Like I know what
Yeah.
immunity is. I know like use immunity versus, you know what I mean? So I had a base of
Hmm.
information. But if you're like, tell me about the bags from like, 1812, I'd be like, that's an interesting thought, but I literally have no base of knowledge outside of reading historical like novels.
Right.
What like the job situation? Like I've been watching these documentaries recently about 1700s Europe, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, I've learned so much, and I was like, oh, Galicia, sorry, what? Like I was like, oh, okay. This place had a kingdom until I didn't know that. Like, there's so many things I just have no context for. It just feels so big. Whereas, like, I went to law school, so I already have a base of knowledge. But
Right. Well, I think also though, once you write in an era for a while, I mean, you also then, you get you have more of that foundation.
right, so you know
I
where to
think I'm
start.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm 20-ish books into my world.
Hmm.
And I did a lot more like at the beginning. Well, I mean, the thing with me too is that even though it's one universe, I've now gone from Regency to Victorian, and I try to
Right.
be pretty accurate about, what's going on in that time. So I do
Hmm.
have to do more research because the time is changing.
Right.
But that keeps it fresh for me. Like, I don't know that I could write, 100 books in just one time era.
I want. Yes,
Because
I
I
wondered
like
about that.
learning about new things. Yeah, yeah.
Ah. Wait.
Yeah, this
What is your
next book actually,
no?
sorry,
What is your
go
number
ahead.
one? I was gonna ask your number one on the. Is it like learner or input or something like that?
Oh, yeah, how did you guess? So, yeah, my number 1 is learner.
I just I'm
Yes.
so sorry.
My number 1 is learner, and my number 2 is achiever.
Okay.
Uh, yeah. So, I just yeah, I
I was
could
just
go to school forever. It's, it's fascinating to me. Actually, so I was just gonna say my next book, the reason why I gave myself, like, extra months to do it is because it involves like a totally different culture. So I've written a lot about, English, British. Um,
hmm
that's the setting of my books. And this one, I have a Chinese hero. So I have to know what's going on in China in like the 1800s, which,
Oh.
I have some, some bases, but there's like the historical part of that.
hmm
Um, it's just fascinating. I've been reading like all these books about the Opium War, which is the
Yeah, no.
context for the book.
So
So,
the things like my little like documentary foray, which I'll never write about, did talk about a lot about China. So I've been to China, and it's so
mhm.
interesting because it's one of the few countries I've been to that has a generally very long continuous history. So they've had wars, but they haven't decimated the country. You know what I mean? In a
Mhm.
way that I don't say like Germany was or Japan or something like that, Well, I guess
Mhm.
so it was super interesting to see all these like historical buildings, whatever it is, that have survived and like all these unbroken family lines and like this history they have without a lot of gaps of lack of information. So that was
And
super.
it's such a long history
Yes,
too,
yes,
right? Like,
yes.
I mean, right, it's just crazy. I mean, actually, I visited my parents not so long ago, and my dad was like trying to, showing me our family genealogy, like back.
Mhm.
He had photos. I think it's my grandmother's photos. Of his great what is that? It's his grandfather.
Right.
Um, and it's just like fascinating to see, all these. I don't know all my. There's a lot of different family branches
Right.
that I'm not aware of. So yeah, it's really. I've only been once to Hong Kong and China, and I really want to
Mhm.
go back. But
But
anyway,
yours
so
yeah.
sorry.
I was gonna ask you go ahead about your about the research, yeah.
Oh no, so it's just it's a lot to kind of learn. Um, and to kind of translate it in my mind from like kind of what I know from my parents to like a romance novel setting. um, to make, because that has to be, I think, novel but also familiar, right?
Yes,
Readers.
that's the commercial fiction part, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because like that's what I write though. I write commercial fiction,
Right.
so it still has to fit into my wheelhouse of like being a steamy romance with like a big mystery.
hmm
So anyway, so it's like kind of a big challenge, but I'm kind of loving it. So it keeps me interested.
Wow. Okay, that's not what keeps me interested. So I'll ask you this because no, the thing that keeps me interested is mostly the characters. The only thing I'm interested in books, and this is the thing I have to write all the other stuff, is I'm super interested in character development over time, like watching people develop over time. But as I was thinking
Oh, that's
about,
also my number one thing. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
so
that's yeah,
as I was
I
thinking
agree.
about talking to you today, so the thing that I find most interesting, not most interesting, this is not fair, but one of the things I find most interesting about you is the psychology background. And the fact that, you were practicing when I met you. Like I think you were down to
Right.
1 or 2 days a week. But
Yeah.
does that lend itself to writing? Because I have to spend a lot of time thinking about people's motivation, um, and well, because the characters exist in like this huge universe, they do have to develop over time. They can't be flat. I mean, there are people who write those where the guy just solves the mystery and then he gets up tomorrow morning and does it again. But that's not
Mhm.
the kind of world I write. So I do think about people developing over time. And I actually watched a character when I finished a series recently, and I was like, oh, it's been 10 years. Like she got over some of her issues. You know what I mean? Like she can't be stuck
Yeah,
in the poor me phase forever. And
right.
that's been interesting. But do you find that your background helps you, how can I say this? See characters in a more three-dimensional way, I think is what I want to say.
I mean, I hope so. I mean, I think that also is what draws me to writing and also in my reading is always the character. That's where I start.
hmm
I don't usually start with like this, maybe this isn't the right way to call it, but like a plot idea. I mean, sometimes I do, but
hmm
it usually has to do with some conflict, between the characters, or like someone's own sort of inner conflict.
hmm
Um but yeah, no, I think like it's not like, is it a conscious thing? I mean, I think because of all the training I've had and years of practice, I do kind of approach characters kind of thinking of them um in terms of, I mean, issues isn't the right word, but like what makes them who they are,
Okay,
right?
fair enough. Yeah.
And so, my universe is also really, it's kind of huge now because I started my books, they start in the 1818, and now I'm like in 1850, and I'm writing second generation characters.
Oh
So
wow.
these characters were like the kids of my first generation hero and heroines. And so this book that I'm writing, the heroine, I'm like going back to her parents' books because she has issues,
hmm
because she was like the secret baby of the parents, right?
Oh,
So,
okay.
that's going to lend itself to kind of her worldview, I would
Right.
think, and kind of what she's looking for in her adult relationship. So,
hmm
yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking. I guess I think like a psychologist. I mean, I don't know. I think I thought, I mean, it's like a chicken or egg thing, right? Because
I
I
know, which
think like
can't
I
be.
was, yeah, because I think I've always been interested in people and relationships, and that's what drew me to psychology, right?
hmm
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it does help, definitely, in terms of kind of goal, motivation, conflict, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, so the thing I think I find interesting, because you're the only psychologist I know who writes. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, as a
Yeah.
writer, I mean, most writers I know are like, well, there's a lot of former lawyers, a couple former doctors, and then a lot of former marketing people, which is brilliant, but not my background.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but I do, let me say this. Psychology is like the one area, well, there's two areas in life that I have had very little interest. One is physics, and the other one is psychology. It's like literally two things I'm just like, no. So I took one physics class and I was like, I don't care about this. And I couldn't understand. I mean, I understand why it's important, but I have no interest in it apart from the fact that forces work. And
Yeah.
the other is psychology. I took one class. So a lot of people were super interested in psychology when I was in school. I didn't
Uh-huh.
understand why. And I took one class called the Psychology of Women, and I was like, I don't understand anything about this. And I sort of walked away from it, probably to my detriment. I have now learned that that is the case. Physics, not so much. Psychology, absolutely. So what I just don't other than like, so I have a therapist, and at some point like years ago she was like, have you ever read about whatever many things? And I'm like, no. And then I open these books and there's like a whole world of like people who write about psychology. And I was like, and some of the books are really helpful because I'm like, I recently read this book, like something about being married to mom, and it was like men who have like, let's say, not the healthiest relationships with their mother. But when I read it, I was like, oh, this is like an exact description of people. Like I literally had never thought about people categorizing humans' behavior in a way that was applicable across multiple humans. Like no, like,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Did
in
you
my
did you think these are all like individual problems or
kind of, yes. I didn't
yeah,
think of people
yeah.
as groups. I thought everybody was like their own little special flower in the world. I mean, it's not that that's not the case. And therefore, you had to approach them as if they were their own special flower. And my therapist is like, no, there's some
Oh
people
my
who
God. You
all.
should read you should read a social psychology textbook that will blow your mind.
So, and so, yes, I'm in the last 5 years, I've read maybe, let's say, 10 or 15 books. I'm like, oh my God, like you can group people's behaviors and then people behave exactly as predicted. And I was like, this is fascinating and amazing. And why did I not know this 30 years ago? Because I could have really used the information then. But well, let me ask you this. What drew you to psychology? Did you major in it in undergrad?
I did. I kind of switched majors.
What did you
And
start with?
I was kind of like biology and English. Like I was thinking one of those two was going to be what I ended up doing.
Hmm.
I was kind of like maybe pre-med. I don't know. My mom's a doctor. They kind of thought,
Hmm.
that would be the right career path for me. And I was like, fine, because I always did well in school.
Hmm.
Um, but then I went to Psych 101. I had the exact opposite reaction to you. I was like, this is the most interesting thing I have ever like encountered in my life is the study of human behavior and why we do the things we do and in some ways how predictable it is. And
That's
also
the
like,
yeah.
the right? I mean, it's not always predictable. I don't want to
Right.
say that, but there's certainly theories that are pretty robust
Mhm.
about human behavior. Um, but yeah, and then abnormal psychology, I was like, this is super my cup of tea. Like, this is amazing.
Wow.
So yeah, no, I just kind of even loved it from undergrad and yeah,
But
so I
when
ended
you
up yeah.
and okay, so when you read books like back then, were you then like, I don't want to call them cataloging, but ascribing like certain behaviors or certain characters? Because the only way I think I've learned about human behavior is through characters and reading lots and lots of books and then predicting people's behavior based on characters, which is clearly not the best move I ever made. But it's how I assess people because you can only meet so many people in life. Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, but you interact with a lot of people. Like I've always been, fairly I think an observer in that sense. But I
mhm.
also did, a lot of volunteer work. I think I volunteered at a crisis hotline,
Wow.
in my teens. I was like a peer counselor. Um,
Wow.
all
Okay.
that always was like interesting to me. But I have to say, when I started getting into psychology in undergrad, I did think, I mean, I always knew I was going to be a clinical psychologist, but I was
Mhm.
more in the research. I thought I was going to do more of like lab research. And when I went to grad school, I ended up kind of liking the clinical. It was like a scholar practitioner model at
Okay.
so I went to Michigan, right?
Mhm.
So that was their program is, you would do research, you would teach, and you would also have to do your clinical, hours.
Mhm.
And I actually found myself much more drawn to like working one on one with people. So I actually went that route rather than, research. But
So can I
yeah,
ask
people
you?
have always interested me. I
Wow,
find
I
people
don't.
interesting, Amy.
I do on a personal level, but on a global level, not so much. Um, but then, so when you, in the sense of the one-on-one, what is it that you enjoy about it? Is it okay, so people don't change, but people can change. So do you enjoy like the people, I guess, having self-awareness and change? Or I don't know, what is it? That's the thing. I have no idea. Like,
Well, I mean, I think that has been the most rewarding part of the work for me.
mhm,
Is I mean, it sounds kind of sappy. It's just knowing that you're helping people.
mhm,
That it's I mean, and I don't think you can always measure it in terms of like long-term behavioral change,
mhm,
but it might be something like just in the moment where you feel like you're giving them a different experience
mhm,
in the moment of therapy, right?
mhm,
And they're having an experience that feels healing or is different from experiences they've had before.
mhm,
Um, and they just, leave feeling a little bit better or a little bit more hopeful,
mhm,
or, at least seeing that there's like different ways to kind of think about a problem, or feeling more resilient and able to tap into resources. I mean, whatever it is.
mhm, right.
It's not, honestly, it's not that different from what I think I do in my writing,
Mhm,
because I write a lot about that. I mean, so you were talking about, how characters, their arcs, right?
right.
I mean, almost every single one of my books, people say that authors have their theme, right?
Yes.
And it's not something that you necessarily do it. You don't necessarily do it intentionally. That's
Mhm.
just kind of like what comes out when you write. And then when you look over your body of work, you're like, wow, I guess that's something like I'm really interested in, right?
Yes.
And my
I
theme is always it's always about self-actualization. It's always about people like overcoming, limiting ideas about themselves, and really finding that person who you know, supports them in that journey to become
mhm,
the version of themselves that they want to be, right?
right, yes.
So that is like not different from what I did as a psychologist,
Right.
really. Um, it's just kind of being able to kind of choose who you want to be. So yeah, I think it all
That's
fits somehow. Like I think my interests of like they've just
mhm,
they've kind of taken different forms, but they're sort of like the same.
right.
If that makes any sense.
Yes, no, yes. Yeah. So, okay, well, let me go back. Did you read a lot when you were young?
I read a lot. Yes.
What kind
Yes.
of things did you So how were you attracted? Because, okay, so every author I've interviewed have read a lot as a child, and I so did I, but I don't know. So I'm an only child of only children, and my grandparents. I spent a lot of time with them. So everybody in my life had a lot of books. Like I grew up in New York City. Would go into
Yeah.
their house or apartment, and they had walls and walls of books. So that was how it was sort of in the air. So I don't have a sense like, I mean, other people's lives are obviously different,
Right.
and so people are always reading, talking about books, talking about social issues, that's for sure, in my family.
Yeah.
And so I would read whatever. So I'd go to the library, read one thing. I'd go to the bookstore, read a different thing. Like one of my grandmothers read a lot of romance. That's how it started. She had romance. She never talked about it. She talked about newspapers and stuff, but I was there and I would pick up the romances and read them, and nobody ever says anything to a child who reads in my world. But my other grandmother read like really popular books at the time. So it'd be like, I'm reading Roots, or I'm reading like Rosemary's Baby or whatever. So she always like had
Hmm.
the most like popular thing at the time and read those. And so it was just sort of in the air. And then I developed my own taste because their tastes were not my taste. You've read like 10 of these and you're like, okay, do you not have anything else? And then, the New York Public Library had obviously a vast array
Yeah.
of books.
Everything. Yeah.
But how did you start? Like, how did you start and realize that that was the thing that sort of held your attention, grabbed your attention, gave you the feeling that you wanted to replicate?
That's actually a really interesting question, because I would say my parents are both like voracious readers, but English is not their first language.
Mm-hmm.
So, they didn't come immigrate to Canada until they were in their 20s.
Oh, okay.
So they had Chinese books around, which obviously they, for some reason, did not teach me to read Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I speak Cantonese.
Mm-hmm.
So I obviously couldn't really read what they wrote. But they were very encouraging of reading and learning and buying me books.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a lot of it from school.
Oh,
I
okay.
think, oh my God, like in elementary school, just like, the library, I remember
Mm-hmm.
all the like Newbery honor books.
Yes.
Like I remember and I'm kind of a funny reader where I read a lot of books, but I also reread books a lot. I've always been that
Oh.
way. Like I am also like that with movies. Like I can literally watch a movie. I mean, don't ask me how many times I have watched the Avengers, like all of them in order
Oh.
from beginning to end.
You're
So I was
killing
like that.
me. I only read
Why?
books once.
But yeah, you and I are it's like how many friends? We're totally different, right?
Oh
No.
my God.
No, I've always been like that. I didn't know it was even like a weird thing.
No, a
But
lot of
I'm
people
trying
reread books. I just don't.
like but a lot. Like I don't want to say obsessively, but it just because it feels like it's just an experience,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. And if I love that world, if I love that character, like I could just read it over and over again. I'm trying to think. So like as a kid, like I remember, oh my God, I was obsessed with this book, like Where the Redfern Grows. Do you know that book? Or
Yes.
Bridge to Terabithia?
Yes.
Like, oh my God, Island of the Blue Dolphins, like
Yes.
all the Ramona Quimby books. Like, I mean, I read everything. I read everything. But I think, as I got, older in my teens and stuff, it was like the romancy parts of the books. Like I love
Mm-hmm.
Jane Eyre. And I
Mm-hmm.
know there's like hella wrong with the romance in that book now.
Now.
Looking back, I know it's very problematic. But, as uh I don't know. I wasn't very old when I read that book. I was maybe sixth grade or something.
Yeah, that's about
I
right.
was like, it seemed very romantic, Mr. Rochester.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, maybe not so much now that he has like a wife locked up in the attic, but okay.
Okay.
Um, I just Pride and Prejudice, even like Anne of Green Gables. It was like always the romance between Anne and Gilbert that I was
Yes.
interested in, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And then I
Yeah.
read some really trashy stuff like Sweet Valley High. With those books.
I think I quit at 40. I know that because that's what the
Yeah,
last
right?
one. That's the last one I
I don't
bought.
I don't even know if she was writing them, Francie Pascal, right? Like at
Mm-hmm.
that point, I
Mm-hmm.
think it was, someone else.
Yes.
So I just basically read whatever I could get my hands on. And I will say the romance books I kind of read in secret
Oh.
because
Mm-hmm.
my parents would not be like very approving of some of those books that I read at a rather early age.
I,
And that began, by the way, my love of historicals.
but
The
okay.
80s were
Mhm.
full of naughty historicals.
So I
Oh my
only
goodness.
found this out later. So I didn't.
You missed the Bodice Ripper like decade.
I
I mean,
did.
they are some of the craziest romances, like to this day.
Mhm. I
I've Yes.
I just I don't know. Like they were obviously at the library. I mean, they weren't out of my purview. Like they were at Walden Books or whatever. God knows that's gone. But like I would go and I was like, there's something. Maybe it was the painted covers. Although the Harlequins had painted covers. There's something about it. And sometimes I look at it and they're like, she's on a ship, and I was like, oh God, no. Like just just tell me about the lady who lives down the street. I want to know what's going on in her life. So I didn't read them, but the contemporary historicals they were not naughty until much later. And so they became sexier over time. And then when I met other people like in college and later, they looked at me and they're like, there's plenty of sex in historical. And I was like, huh. Just
Oh my goodness. They were like, yeah. They were much ahead of, I mean, they could really, honestly, for Steam. I mean, I don't know if you've read Bertrice Small, but
later,
some of
yes.
those books, yeah, I mean, like when I was reading, I was like, what? You like, huh? Like, I don't think I actually like understood. all the things that she was writing about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that was sort of like my introduction to romance was also those books that I discovered on my own without help from my parents.
So did you? So let me ask you about rereading because okay, so I don't. I'm gonna okay. I am seeking both novelty and the same. So I want the same experience, but with through new
You're an
characters'
avid
eyes.
reader, Sylvie. Yes. I mean, Amy, sorry.
It's okay. So I just the how can I say this? So okay, so I'm often disappointed. I will be honest. Like I just picked up a book that I've been reading the last 2 nights, and I'm like, oh, this is not what I wanted. But the only way to get that next experience that's similar to the previous one without rereading the previous book is to go through a lot of books looking for it. And then it feels like a treasure. It's like, oh, I read 10, but book 11 finally is giving me the thing that book one gave me. Um,
Wow. You are much more patient than I am. I would say I know. So while I think I'm a very specific reader. I mean, in a way, I don't even care about, like, I don't really care about genre
mhm,
as long as I love the author's voice. It's the
mhm,
voice for me as a
right.
reader. So if I love the voice, I will pretty much read everything that the person wrote. Even if like the books aren't great, I'll just be like, "Oh, but I love this voice," and it will like draw me in
Well, I
enough.
do the same, but the problem is that people can't write as fast as I read. I mean, you know that. I mean, as a writer, you know this. Like, if
Yes, I get this a lot. It's
if
like,
your
"Can you
readers
please
want
write faster?"
23, Grace books,
Yeah,
like today,
yeah.
they can, they can't have 23 tomorrow.
But
So,
I always, I mean, I think that's why I go rereading the books that I really love, because I know they're going to give me that. Which is also why I think why I ended up writing this huge universe. It wasn't completely planned at the beginning, but
mhm.
it's like I love that because then there's details and nuances you capture, right? Like in rereading, you don't get sick of it. You just notice new things. Um,
That's
so
I wouldn't
yeah,
know.
you're like, no, yeah, I don't do that.
I mean, I keep books on the shelf. I don't actually have that big of a keeper shelf because I'm not going to reread them. I looked at my keeper shelf the other day, maybe 5 books, and I was wondering why one of them was missing, and I thought, oh, obviously it's gone. Um, but that's so interesting. But then how do you? Okay, so then how do you decide rereading versus a new one, or are you just waiting for a new one from favorite authors?
How do I just I don't know, like I'm kind of a mood reader too, right?
Hmm.
Like I'll be like, oh, I feel like having, I don't know, like a good second chance romance. Like, and then
Right.
I just go through my head, I guess, like, oh, which is like, I'm like, oh, I haven't read this for a while. Go back and read it. Also, I think part of it is it's really kind of funny, but I feel like, so my husband remembers everything.
Hmm.
He's amazing with dates. He's amazing with like, "Oh, do you remember this happened when we first met 25 years ago or whatever?" And
Right.
I'm like, yeah, sure, honey." I feel like my memory is not so specific. Well, I don't know, that's not true though, because I when I meet someone, I tend to like really remember, you know, like what they say and everything. But it's
Mhm.
for books and stuff, it's like I can actually it's like it's new to me again, which you must think is totally crazy. Like
Yeah,
how it can be new to you after you've read it like, I don't know, like
no, no.
20 times.
I will
But
say this.
yeah.
So I did an interview on a podcast. Let's say 6 months ago. I don't know. I'm bad with time. And I had to reread the book because I have made that mistake in life. So I reread the book before doing the podcast. So I was not, and that's the first book I've reread in such a long time. And I realized I reread it maybe 10, 20 years ago. So a lot of it I had not remembered at all. And I still enjoyed it.
Totally.
It held up,
But
which is
also
good. But
but don't you also think like for me when I read, I mean it depends on like who you were 10 years ago is not who you are now, right?
that's
So
true.
like reading, it's like an interaction between you and the book. So the book kind of changes like as you change, I think. For me, I would say.
Yeah, I will say this. Since I don't reread, I don't know, but I did re. I occasionally will. I have like 3 or 4 awful TV series on DVD in my house. I will not get into it, but just like popcorn, TV.
Yeah.
And maybe like 6 months ago, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to rewatch this series," and the series is like 20 years old. So there's some issues that don't hold up, and you're just like, "Oh, I
Sure.
can't
Yeah.
believe." But some of them, it was such okay. So I didn't grow up knowing things about boundaries and a lot of things that I clearly missed out on. And they were sitting in the series, and this is like the 90s, and she was like, "Well, I think you need better boundaries," and I was like, so when I watched the first time, I had no idea what they were talking about. My brain just skipped over it. And I was so fascinated by the idea that people were talking about that kind of thing 20 years ago. And I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
I missed it. So,
Well,
yeah.
no, that's exactly. So I actually just because I was at my parents' house
Mhm,
visiting them, and I found these old Agatha Christie books of
mhm.
mine. I loved mystery also, which is why I write a lot of mystery in my
Right.
books. But yeah, so I had not read Tommy. I don't know if you know the Tommy and Tuppence. Tommy and Tuppence was like they're a lot less known than like Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple or whatever.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
they're she did this marvelous thing where she wrote this couple. I think there's 5 or 6
mhm,
books, and she wrote them like through all their stages of life. Like the first book is like when it's like the courtship book, like
mhm,
they're young and they start this detective agency together, and at the end of the book they're together. The next book is like 6 years later, they're a detective couple. The book after that, they have kids, they're kind of middle aged,
mhm.
so on and so forth. And I had not read those books for like, oh, I don't know, it's been like over 20 years.
Right.
And of rereading it, I there was so much I did not understand when
Mhm,
I read it 20 years ago. Like there's all this like actually really witty, adorable banter
mhm.
between the couple. And that was just all like over my head because
Right.
I didn't understand it at the time. I wasn't like, that adult, I guess.
Mhm.
But it's just amazing. And you're right, like it didn't obviously because I think these books are written, I don't know when they were written. Like
So
it's
I feel like we're
the
up to
40s
70.
maybe.
Yeah. Well, no, 80 years, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a long time. Like the last Tommy and Tuppence book was actually our last book, and it's actually apparently not very good, and how shows people have done like studies of like how it shows like signs of Alzheimer's or dementia and stuff.
Mhm.
Like in the writing, you can kind of see that.
Right.
But anyway, it was just like yeah, certain of the issues and the plotting, from a mystery point of view, is kind of
Right.
hokey now, right? Like it's
Mhm.
kind of super obvious.
Right.
Um, Mostly because people probably copied her and like it's just become a thing, like a trope.
That's true. Yeah.
But I mean, it's just anyway. But the writing itself was the dialogue and stuff was just wonderful, and I saw it with new appreciation, being who
Mhm.
I am now versus when I read it. But anyway,
That's no,
yeah.
that's super interesting. Okay, I'm still not going to reread books, but I only reread books. Let me see. I start books by accident because I'm a cover picker, and then you pick it up and
Oh,
you go,
okay.
oh, this one attracted me again. But you'll read the first couple paragraphs. And I'm like, this sounds familiar. But I actually keep a list because I also have no memory of books. I mean, I really can't remember. Like I just
So how would you even know if you reread it? Maybe you've accidentally been rereading
Well,
books.
now, whenever Goodreads came out, I was like the first person to sign up. And I was like, this is great because now I have a list. So actually, there's a book that somebody recommended a couple days ago. And I was like, I don't know if I read it. I'm not sure. I looked on Amazon. It was like 2019. I was like, I think that's not right. I'm pretty sure I read it. So I had to look on Goodreads. It was a reprint edition, but they don't always put the original date. And I was
Right.
like, oh no, I read this in 2009. Like now I know. I'm good. Like I'm good. But so I just keep a list because I don't remember titles. I remember the feeling I had when I was reading the book. That's what I mostly remember.
I also don't remember titles at all,
I
but
know.
I'm with you. Yes, the feeling. Yes, the mood, right? Like you
Yeah.
remember kind of like the emotional experience of reading the book.
Correct. That's what I remember. And so it's only,
Yeah.
sometimes I'll read a couple paragraphs and I don't remember it was like Jane was the heroine. Like it just that doesn't stick at all. And then I'll get
No.
like a couple and I'm like, oh no. I remember this. Like I remember this feeling. I don't remember these people or where they lived or what kind of house she had or job or whatever. But I do remember the feeling. And so that's what I'm looking for with a new book. I want the same feeling, but with a different story around it.
Right, like I said, that's
Mhm.
usually what people want, which is kinda interesting. It's a dilemma, right, for
Writers,
as a
yeah.
writer.
Oh,
Yeah, because
it's
it has to stay fresh. You don't wanna be like, because I think as a reader also, you see the feedback, like, it's the same thing over and over again, and I don't wanna be that writer.
mhm.
Also, I that would become very stale for me, like,
Yes.
very quickly. But it's very hard. It's a very hard balance, to strike of being mostly in your wheelhouse, but, like,
Mhm.
still keeping it fresh.
Right, it's
Yeah, I was
I
just
call it
talking about this with a yeah, what do you call it?
the same but different.
Yeah, no, everyone wants same but different, and I think the more books you write, like I would, one of my good friends I hang out with, Barbara,
Mhm.
she's written like I don't like a lot of books.
Books, that's true.
She's like, it's like when you've been doing it for a really long time, or you have like a very big catalog,
Mhm.
60, 70, whatever, 100 books, it's hard to like, come up with something that is still, interesting and new to you.
So
So,
wait,
I
but
mean, yeah.
do you think that aging so obviously we're all aging, but do you think that as you grow older and maybe have a deeper understanding of people, the world, I don't whatever that is, that that would change your approach to telling stories?
I mean, I think who we are affects our filter, right?
Okay.
Through which we see the world.
Mhm.
And I mean, I would kind of assume that affects the writing. So, yeah, I think that would definitely change. But I don't know, when you're writing commercial fiction, like there's still, the characters and their conflicts and the resolution. And
Right.
so I mean I do think, yes, I do think your voice probably changes with time and how you see things change with time. But it's like how they say there's only what are those like actually 12 stories or
Right,
something.
yes, I was just telling my
Yeah,
son that. Yeah.
like, right?
I was like, "I hate to disappoint you, but there's not that many."
Yeah, there's really not that many. So it's really about I mean, ultimately, I think I've just settled for as long as it feels fresh and interesting to me when I'm writing it,
Mhm.
that's the best that I can do.
Oh, that's
Like
yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah. That's super interesting. I think I'm thinking about what you're saying because I think what has changed for me, the differentiation is to be more topical. So I think the first books were more interior, like their interior journey,
Hmm.
but now there's more external conflict because we can only go on the interior journey so many times. So many times before the external has to change them or something has to, there has to be more interaction with external factors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. That makes total sense. I
But
don't know
that
what I've
But then do you think like the opium war or whatever it may be will then be that external factor? Because that is markedly different
yeah.
from yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the kind of historical research I mean, that's why I find it interesting to write in different time periods
Hmm.
because then you're dealing with different like cultural mores,
Right.
like things are different. Like
Right.
the research is different, like how people interact are different, the technology is different. So that keeps it fresh for me. Um
That is so interesting. So
yeah.
can I ask you
Mhm.
what okay, so in the whole same but different, a lot of people, especially who write historical, who write Regency or whatever the Scottish Highlands, whatever it is, are very focused on a specific time period and it's very narrow. How have your readers taken the evolution of time? Because I have like one of my series, Time Moves Forward. It started in 1990. I don't know, don't ask me. And it's 2009. It takes place in the past. But and so it's
Yeah.
been 10 years, 12 years, I don't know how many years. And but because the plots are fairly similar, people have been okay with it, I guess. I haven't heard anything about it. But historical readers as well writers perception of historical readers is that they're
Yeah.
fairly narrow in their preferences for time period and types of books. So what reactions have you gotten from readers about the evolution of time? I mean, time does pass in real life, but in books often not.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I personally have not heard any feedback about that, which is kind of fascinating.
It is.
Um, but I don't. I mean, there's a part of me like I kind of wish, that I had maybe started earlier in the Regency, so I could have a few more Regency books, but
Right.
I can go back.
Right.
Um, because I started in 1818, so we're already like pretty late,
Mm-hmm.
um, late Regency, and then my next book is 1828. So
Right. Oh,
I kind
yeah,
of
that's 10-year
yeah
gap. Yeah, okay.
yeah. So basically, I didn't end up doing this on purpose, but it's like every series is like about 10 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I have not heard readers complain, but I think you're right. I mean, I know people very specifically, there's a readership that's just like, I love Regencies or I
Yes.
love like Highlander books.
Yes.
Um, but I do think like Regency and Victorian is kind of, I don't know, I think that's not a terribly difficult transition to make. I think if I get past Victorian, like Edwardian or something, like then I
Right.
think we're getting into a little bit more, you know, uh, I'm not sure what that will look like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna get that far. Although, shows like Downton Abbey, have kind of brought that era
Back. That's true. That's true. Because
back
previously,
a little bit.
my experience of readers was that they did not read in that era. And I always wonder if it's because
I
it's.
have I've never, I'll be honest, I have not read in that era myself
Oh,
personally.
okay.
Yeah, no, I've always read like Regency and Victorian. Um so I'm still within, I would say, the two periods that are probably, like, historically speaking, have been very popular, like,
Mm-hmm.
England in those eras, right?
Right.
That's um but yeah, I don't know what would happen if I went beyond that. I mean, I kind of hope, like, because now I've been writing for a while, I have a wonderful readership, and they
Mm-hmm.
follow because of the characters,
Right.
because there's like different generations and they want to see, the old characters and what happens to the new ones. So hopefully that will transcend,
That's true.
and
I mean, people.
any
Yeah.
specific time and place. But I don't know. Yeah.
That's so interesting. So I have to ask you, when did you write your first book?
2000. I think I started it 2009. Did I write it? Yeah. I think I started 2009, and then I finaled for the Golden Heart in 2010, and then I
Okay.
self-published it in 2011.
Wow. Okay, I have so many questions. So how? Because okay,
So many questions.
in 2010 I had a baby, so
Oh,
I'm
so
gonna.
did, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah.
So my
Okay, go
memory
ahead.
is spotty. Like my son was born in February 2010. So to be honest, like it was like talk to people, crying baby. You know what I mean? So there's like some
Yeah.
disconnect from that time, but I wasn't dead. So what? Okay, as a Golden Heart finalist, well, okay, I'm sure you're aware people talk about the curse of the Golden Heart finalists and the difficulty sometimes people have who are Golden Heart finalists finding a publisher.
Yeah.
So that's one
Yeah. They
thing.
like finaled like 20 times or
Yes,
something, right?
yes.
And yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, thankfully my journey it was shorter than that, but
but did you consider
mhm.
traditional publishing after finaling in the Golden Heart?
Oh yeah, because like back then indie was still kind of new, and I wasn't sure. It's kind of funny to think about it now, but I wasn't sure it was going to last, and
Yeah, yeah, I know.
like I wasn't sure if it was the right way to go.
Hmm.
So actually, even before I finaled, I'd submitted this. So it was Her Husband's Harlot.
Okay,
I submitted it to like a bunch of actually, and then I got picked up by an agent. It was actually before I finaled in the Golden Heart.
okay.
So he was already shopping it around, I think back then. Back then,
Hmm.
was it like the Big Ten? And then it quickly became
Became
like the Big Seven. And then
and
it
then
was like
six, and
the Big
then
Five. Yeah,
right.
yeah. It was like
It was
year by
so
year. It just kind of like, so he couldn't sell that book. He
okay.
shopped it everywhere. And the feedback I got at the time was, this book is too steamy. And it
Wow.
yeah. Yeah. It is steamy, but it's not that. I mean, I don't know. I'm like, did they also not read historicals in the 80s?
Exactly.
um, but yeah, but they were like, yeah, it's too steamy. But I think the bigger thing that people were like, I don't understand like how we would market this book. because it does not fit in neatly into any category.
Mm-hmm.
It's super steamy, it's historical, but there's like all this mystery in it. Like, what the hell, you know? So they were like, it's kind of like, I don't get it. I like the voice, I like the writing, but I don't know what line or like how I would sell this.
Right.
Um, and so my friend Tina had gone like full on self publishing. And she's like, "Well,
Ah,
why don't you just like I'll help you to like just
right.
do it." And I was like, I don't know, like, and then so I did it in 2011, and then it was like, within a couple months, it was like number one in its category on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it just kind of happened, but it was, it's like timing was a
Yes.
lot of it, and then
Mm-hmm.
like I mean, back then things were so different. I mean, I was still working full time. I was never thinking that I would quit my career as a psychologist because writing was always like, I don't want to say it was a hobby, but it was definitely something I did for like pure enjoyment, right?
Right.
Like
A
I just
passion,
loved
we'll say
doing it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's call it a passion. And it was like kind of a lark,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, and also my son at that time was he has like special needs. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's just like lots of stuff. I was like working in the hospital during the day, coming home, taking care of him. And then I'd have like, a couple hours at night
Mm-hmm.
where I just wanted to do something for me.
Right.
And that's like where I started writing. Um, but so anyway, yeah, so it just kind of took off. And, I wasn't, because of like my life, I wasn't releasing a lot. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really thinking of it as a business yet.
Right.
At the beginning, I released like every year and a half, maybe. Like,
Mhm, yeah.
so some time passed, which in retrospect, I wish I had maybe jumped on the writing as a business kind of
Bandwagon
train a
earlier.
little bit early.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But, I wasn't sure, to be honest, that I wanted to do it mostly because actually, I mean, first of all, I liked my work as a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wanted to continue that, but also I didn't want to like put a burden on something like my muse, like,
Yes.
something that
Yes.
you just love to do. And I was like, I don't want to turn this into something that's work because
Right.
I just
Yeah.
love doing it. And it's my kind of my escape.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, but then, it just kind of took off. And then I was like, yeah, I think I can do this. So yeah, I didn't start like quit until like do actually full time until 2018.
I remember that. But okay, different conversation. But so
Yeah.
do you ever think about what if okay, so if indie hadn't come, do you think you would have changed your voice? Like, I don't know, drop the mystery or drop the sex. Because there's historical mysteries and then there's historicals with sex, but they usually are not combined. Um, do you think you would have
Well,
changed
yeah,
or do you think you would have kept on passioning, you know?
it's funny because I've had this conversation so often with my friends who have been writing like a long time and have been writing for publishers for like
Right.
a long time.
Mhm.
And like, the stories they tell, like if you're writing for category, right?
Right.
Category
Yes.
romance, or like you basically have to write this. They tell you this is this and you write this,
Right.
right? Kind of think I could never do that. Like,
I know.
I mean, I actually think I would be very bad at doing that because that's not what I enjoy.
That's
Like that's
so
not
yeah.
that's not my approach. And honestly, I have another career that I completely enjoy as well, and I would much rather be doing that work than
No,
kind of
something
writing
yeah.
that's inauthentic to what I want to write.
Mhm.
Like, there's nothing against category romance. Like, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. It's just like I'm not that kind of writer, like so yeah, I kind of I mean I do plot, but I also am very open to where the characters take me.
Mhm.
Um Sometimes it's to kind of weird places. So
No, that's such
yeah.
an interesting thing because okay, so my original theory, I mean, so the first I think RWA thing I went to was 2006, excuse me. And I was like, I want to write category romance. And
Oh, interesting.
I what I didn't
Oh
realize
my
was
God, how different are we?
I know, but I realized I couldn't do it, and I really tried very
Ah,
hard to keep it. Like I tried hard to keep it in a box, and like even one book, and this is like even when I was indie publishing, I wrote a romance, and in the middle of the romance, the hero's father has like Alzheimer's, and they have to find a memory care facility for him. And I
right.
thought, okay, so I've now again made this departure, and I
Yeah,
have to
right?
acknowledge
Yeah.
I'm that person. But the book I'm reading now, actually, so I'm reading it for the romance, and in the middle of the book, her mother has a stroke, and they're looking for a facility, and I go, oh, I'm not the only one. Like,
You're not the well,
who's like,
I think indie changed a lot of what were perceived as rules, right?
yes,
Like the inviolable rules of like publishing
hmm
is like now it's like, well, if you can find a market, you can write whatever
you
is in
want,
your heart,
right?
you know, and I've always been that kind of a writer. Um so it would be very hard for me to do, I mean, yeah, to do the other way.
Yeah, the
So,
yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people who've written 25, 50, 100 category romances, and it is
mhm.
very specific. Although I understand actually from talking to people recently that they have relaxed the rules because obviously you can only get so many people who are going to do that box thing when they can do something different.
Mhm.
So they're a little more forgiving. I understand to be the case, but I know a lot of people who wrote, they got their $5,000 advance and it was very specific and it came back and it was like, these are the rules. And the rules are written. I mean, they used to be able to Google them and it's like, they can
Yeah.
only do this and they have to be this age and they have to live here. And it was very, very specific. And so if you could do that, but I do admire a lot of those writers for their ability to be creative within a box, which was never my forte. But they could,
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's very, it takes a different kind of skill. I just think like people, you know, people think differently, right? Like they
mhm,
approach writing differently.
right.
It's not like one way is good or bad. It's just not something that I particularly would enjoy in the way that I write.
Mhm.
So, I also write like way too long. So
You do.
like
It's
to fit into, you know.
There were very specific
Um,
word limits. It's like, it has to be between 55 and 6,000, 55 and 60,000, and that's it. Like there was no wiggle room really
yeah, yeah,
at
no,
all.
there's, you know. Plus I also really think that, you know, I like to write what I enjoy reading.
Hmm
And I was never like a big category romance person. Like I
hmm
said, I read those
Right.
big juicy historicals in the 80s. Um, so, you know, it was never really my particular interest. Not that there aren't wonderful category romances out there. It's just
Right.
not what I cut my teeth on as a reader.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Um,
I've probably read thousands of them. Actually, I recently was looking at the Silhouette Desire. There's a page somewhere on the internet that has like all the covers. And I was like, oh my God, I have all these
have
books.
you read all of them?
At least the first 300 of a lot of those series, like that Harlequin Temptation. Like, there's a lot of them where I read them. Well, you go to the library and they'd have the 6, 5, whatever the monthly thing is. I would take them
Yeah.
all out, read them. Some were good, some were bad, whatever, and return them all. And then I learned to look at the copyright page to see who the writer was because they wrote so often that they would require the authors to change their names.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and so I look at the
Well, actually,
copyright.
now that I think about it, like maybe I did read like Sweet Valley High was a little bit because they're about the size of a category
Yes,
romance,
those are
right?
very, very similar. And it's so, I mean, but you could see that when you read them, like they had to do that same introduction about the twin. It was very formulaic, the beginning, at least
But it
all of
was
them.
super formulaic. But I'll tell you where I think why I don't naturally turn to category romance, and it might be different if it was more of like a series, because I feel like I always wanted more about the characters,
Hmm
but you can't when you only have like 50,000
Yes,
words.
there's no more. There's no side characters,
There's
no
no
friends.
more. Like, yeah, and like I always want more. I want more of the universe, more of the character, more of like, you know,
Oh,
all of
that's
that. Whereas with Sweet Valley High, like I think because it's almost like a serial, you
right.
got more as you read over the series.
Right.
Because there's all what the hell were their names?
Jessica
There's a good twin of, yeah.
and
Oh yes, you would remember that. Yeah.
yes, and the other
And
one.
Elizabeth,
Yes,
the
that's
good
exactly.
girl.
Oh,
She
is
was
it
the good girl.
Wakefield? The Wakefield twins. Sorry, that took a minute.
Now we're gonna have to go back and like reread all our like Sweet Valley. Oh my God.
I hope my mother has them in a garage somewhere.
I
because I
haven't. I did not see mine, so I think my parents
they
probably
may have
paid for
finally
some
got
variant.
rid of them. But I remember buying them all, and I would buy them and read them in like a couple hours, and I'd be like, oh, well, now it's like 11 a.m. Now
No,
what?
totally. Well, and I think they had some reboot, which I did not read. It's like, 90210 or something.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
when they're adults, like, I wonder if she ever got together with Todd. Was it Todd?
Todd, yes, it was.
Yeah.
Oh my
If they
god.
stayed together or not, like, I don't know.
Oh, I have so many
But
questions now. I'm gonna go look that up. But
yeah, no, I have to also, like, what was the fate of that? How did that all end up?
oh, I read them. I don't know why I stopped. So wait, why did you stop reading them? Because I continued on past reading them. I swear to God, I read. I think the last one in my house was like in the 30s or 40s. I remember that because they were all like pink. They were pink and like lilac and whatever.
They were
And
all pastel
yes,
colors. I can see like the sort of varsity font, right?
yes, I can
Like,
see it in my head.
I know, me too. Why did I think I got bored. I think
Yeah.
I got bored of that world.
Mhm.
Like, it was
Because
just
there
kind
wasn't
of,
enough change. Actually, there wasn't enough evolution. Now that I think about it, because it was
yeah.
more the same and
Were they
less different.
and were they always like in high school like the whole time? I mean,
I
I
feel
just
like
don't remember.
I feel like they must have gone to college, but they all went to the same school. Their school was in town, but I'd have to really think. I was like, oh my God, 12, 13. Like it's like 14 maybe. That's I think when I left it and I moved on to category romance. But maybe that was then I could see now that maybe it was just a direct line. It was like I needed category romance.
It's the gateway to
It's
category
a gateway to
romance,
category
right?
romance. Yeah.
Definitely. Although it's more of a serial. It's more of a
Yes.
serial than pure
Yes.
category.
Category romance
But
didn't even
also,
have series back then. They really discouraged that. I think the editors did because they wanted each thing to be an individual experience.
that's so interesting. I wonder why they,
Because I think
in terms of sales or whatever.
the sales model didn't. We talk about this a lot now. I don't. Okay, I think one of the reasons indie took off is because editors were so rigid in their thinking about what readers would like. But they were
Yeah.
very rigid in like you can't like even with the name change, like the authors. It was because I was looking at the Silhouette Designers, and Jane Ann Krentz had written a lot of them under whatever her multiple pen
I
names were.
did, yeah, no, I did read a few of her category and liked them. I liked
Mhm.
her category romances. But that's a voice thing for me because
Yes.
I love her voice.
So they would repeat the voice because the
Yeah.
voices were popular, but they were very hesitant to have, Five Brothers or all the things that we do now.
Yeah,
Were
which
not.
as a reader I actually love.
I do too, but
So,
they didn't do it back then. But I think it was about the sales model. So because especially with categories, you couldn't go back and get them because they were only on the shelf 30 days and then they pulped them. So
oh, right. I didn't even think of that. So you could never get it again.
you could never get it again. So if you had a series and you wanted to go back and find out what happened to brother number one, it would be impossible. I think the books were very unimportant individually, but as a global marketing strategy, they were important. You know what I mean? So it's like every month you can get 6 new of this experience, but they weren't interested in going back. I mean, they were pulped. I mean, it was pulp fiction. You know what I mean? So I could
Yeah, yeah. Well,
see
also I could see because they're not out to build the author's brand either.
no,
They're
nope.
they're just out to build their line. It's
Their
the line.
brand. It
The
was the
brand of the
line,
line.
brand of the line,
Yeah,
and not the
yeah.
brand of the author. So I think, although I did
Yeah, yeah.
discover a
That
lot of
makes
authors that way because there were a few who broke out, but they had to then write single title or women's fiction.
well, yeah, like Nora Roberts,
Right.
Jane Eyre they
Yeah.
all wrote like a ton of category, right?
Tons of
Yeah.
them. One of my favorites was Barbara Delansky, who then moved into women's fiction, which I like. But it was very yes. So they didn't break out. So and eventually I did leave those because it wasn't fulfilling enough. At some point you're like I can only have
That's why I never got really I just felt like I always wanted more
well,
than
there's only so
that,
many Navy
you know.
SEALs, so many captive romances within the time limit, and then you're like, but what if
Yeah.
they had explored this other thing? But what about her sister? And then it would just be
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
too bad, so sad.
Exactly.
So that was that. It had to go. But so what do you read now? Actually, now I wonder, what do you read?
Oh, I read everything.
Mhm.
I read mostly romance, although I just am in the middle of an Agatha Christie binge. Um, but yeah, I don't read a lot. To be honest, I don't read a lot of historical romance. Um, and it's just because I don't. It's weird. I don't really like reading what I'm writing. I
Right.
think
Yes.
other people have said that. It just kind of like I'm already in that world. I just don't want to, So I don't read a lot of historical romance when I'm writing. So I read contemporary. I read.
Oh, you read contemporary. I love that. I'm sorry, I love
Oh
contemporary
yeah, yeah.
romance. It's my favorite.
No,
Like,
no. I read contemporary romance.
mhm.
Yeah, I read an interesting monster romance that everyone had been talking about, and I was like, wow, this is fascinating.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm very interested in like kind of, it's like the new twists on things.
Yes,
Are I just kind of want to know what people are doing, and it's often very novel, but often the same.
of course.
The things that do well, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm like, yeah, there's like crazy all these different species of monsters. But yet, the connection, is like this is still the thing that makes me feel this.
Right.
So that's always kind of interesting.
Oh, that's
Yeah, so no,
interesting.
I read a lot. I've been like reading a lot of historical, like research books too.
Oh, yeah.
That's the nerdy side of me.
Do you
So
read so you said you read mysteries, but do you read mysteries like okay, there's two kinds of mysteries. One that I don't read are just straight mysteries. And then the other ones are cozy or thrillers or there's some other element to them or police procedurals, which actually I love. But do you only read like straight like death resolution as opposed to
probably what do I read in terms like well, I do. I think maybe it's more cozy stuff. Like, I just, yeah, I love Agatha Christie. She's kind of like a comfort food. Um,
Mhm.
but I'll read some I read The Girl on the Train way back. Like, I
Mhm.
like that book a lot. But
Oh,
it's not my usual cup of tea. But I've read some like Ruth Ware and
yeah, yeah,
what
that's
category is that?
I think that's
I
to
don't
me is
know.
more straight mystery because there's not a lot of so like when I read like police procedurals, like somebody kills somebody, obviously, and but then
Yeah.
it's a lot of well, at least with police, it's a lot of internal police politics, and they're so the guy, it's always the detective who really wants to just solve the murder, but for political reasons they don't want to, or his
Got it, got
boss
it.
is like,
Yeah,
they don't.
I don't think I really read that. Cuz like my mystery plots I think are more kind of in line with the old school just mystery
Yes.
stuff.
Okay.
Like who killed them or who kidnapped this or,
Hmm.
where is this hidden? Like, that kind of those kinds of
Yes.
questions.
Yes.
Um
I
But
struggle with
yeah,
those
no,
as well.
it really is. Do you? I don't think I mean I might enjoy a police pursuit. I just haven't really where I love is like I love British detective series. Like
Well,
I've
so
watched
do
a lot
those
of
I
them on TV.
love. I do
They're
love those.
amazing.
But I think it's because of
Yeah.
the writing. I think I like so I have read a lot of both British I grew up on these because that's what my mother read. But I read a lot of British writers and Irish writers. But I like the turn of phrase in the storytelling a lot. And
Oh
also
yeah.
sometimes it's a foreign I mean, I've been to these places, but you know what I mean? It's foreign as opposed to reading about like somebody who killed somebody in New York City. I'm like, okay, well, it's Tuesday. But
Yeah.
if somebody kills
No,
somebody
I
in
have to.
a neighborhood of London, I'm like, oh
Yeah.
wait, what's more? I want more know more about that. I don't know a lot about the history of that neighborhood. What are you saying? Yeah.
Yeah. Generally, I won't. I don't read really like hardcore. Like I get scared very easily.
Mm.
So like stuff with like serial killers. I don't really like child abduction. Like it's just not my cup of tea. I'm just like I'm too scared.
No, I don't read those either, but mainly because I find, well, I'll ask you about this, but mainly because I like people to have a reason for committing a crime. If you're just a psychopath, that to me is not enough of a reason. I mean, it's a reason, but it's not nuanced. And I want this
Yeah.
person
Yes.
wronged me, and that's why I kill them. Not I kill people because it's fun and I don't have like a
Yeah.
disorder.
Exactly.
So, but I find that
Exactly.
most of those books are mostly like that. I quit one recently, and they were like, "It's just a psychopath, and he's sending clues." And I'm like, "Okay, but he doesn't have a reason." And I want some injustice. I mean, I want something deeper.
Or like yeah, like some secret,
Yeah,
right? Like that's what
yeah,
like some like personal connection,
right,
to the person who's solving the crime.
right. Yes.
Um. Yeah. Serial killing is just like
No, I just pulled a random lady off the street. Okay, well,
ugh.
you know, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And also
I mean,
too,
I'm sure there's great books out there, but it's just, for me, it's also like I do read mostly, I would say like 90% of what I read is romance because I really, the escapism and the fantasy factor is very high for me. Like, that's why I read. So I want to like escape into like a world I want to live in, you know? Um, so
that's so interesting. So I don't read for that reason, and I only realized later in writing romance and meeting readers at reader events that they were looking for a different experience than I was. I was like, oh, no, no, no. I'm just looking to like validate human behavior. Like to find out there's more than one
yeah.
person who behaves that way. I'm not looking to escape. It's oddly not what I'm looking for in reading at all. I just want reading to me is like a learning and a little investigation into human behavior, and not so much an escape. I don't want to live in the world
Well,
of 90% of the books I read.
yeah, well, and that makes sense. If I mean, it's awesome. Like, so you found your niche, right, with legal thrillers,
Yes.
because that like offers you all the things you're looking for. Whereas me, I want the fantasy. I want the fairy tale ending. I want like good people to like
Triumph.
have their redemption. Yes, and I
Yeah.
want bad people to be like punished. So it's not like the real life at all in some ways.
No, I love a
Like,
good ambiguous ending. I'm like, they got away with it.
oh,
And
those are the worst. I hate ambiguous
I love
endings.
them.
Oh God. I'm like, I want my epilogue where they're like married a year later and have the baby. I want like ambiguous.
Oh my god, my child just asked me the other day about epilogues, and I was talking about babies ever after because that's what I call them. And he was like,
I am firmly in that camp, I will say.
he was like, I want you to poll your readers. He's always got these ideas. He's like, I want you to send a newsletter where you poll your readers to see what they think about epilogues. So I probably will do it because it's just interesting. But I was just like that. I like the ambiguity, and so does he. We were just talking about it. He was like, I just want to know that they're living their life. I don't need it tied up in a bow. And I was like, oh, I love you.
Oh my God. Like literally, the ending of The Sopranos drove me crazy.
I
was
loved
like,
it.
what is happening? What does this mean? Like, I don't get it.
But life, okay, so I'm going to ask you this, and it'll probably be my last question, but don't you
Yeah.
feel that life is ambiguous? So my son and I were talking.
Yes. No, yes.
And
Life is ambiguous.
So he was
which is why I read, because I don't want that ambiguity. It's not part of my fantasy, right? Like fantasy and reality are pretty different for me.
Oh.
So I read to escape, like,
We were just talking about, so he changed schools, and we were just talking about, well, he still talks to the kids because it's kind of a small little town in LA in some way, in respects. But he was like asking me about something, and he was like, so what happens to all the people you know? And I was like, outside of Facebook, and even that I'm not so good at. I don't know. And the ambiguity is okay. I was like, you learn to live with the ambiguity. You meet lots of people in life, and you don't know what happens in the end. I mean, they die in the end, but you don't know. Well, you know the ending, but you don't know the path that it's going to take in the meanwhile. And he was like, how do you live with that? And I was like, it's absolutely fine. Like once I got past 17 and I realized you just are not going to know, I'm okay with the ambiguity. But I do like that in books because it mirrors life. You just don't always get to know.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges in life is to learn to live
With the ambiguity.
gracefully with uncertainty.
Yes.
I mean, I think that is like the core skill of living. That is difficult for most of us. So, yeah, but I'm not looking for that in my reading. I understand that is true. Yeah, I know that very, very well. But, in my reading, I'm looking for the opposite. It's escapism. I look for the same thing in like other forms of entertainment too. Like, when I'm like movies and stuff, I want the escapist fare. I want like superheroes and like, period dramas. I don't want like gritty realism.
Oh, I'm only I only do No, I have a phrase because my son came home one day and he goes, "Do you only like trauma, death, sadness, and depression?" And I was like,
Oh,
"Yes,
God.
yes, that's what I'm looking for in my entertainment." And he's like, "Okay." We put on a superhero. I was like, "For you, sure. For me, not so much. I'm gonna go do something else." I'm going to go do laundry now. But no, that's, but
That's hilarious.
so what I will say this, I think then the beauty of today's entertainment is that they do serve both. And when I was younger, there was less of the latter. And now I'm delighted with ambiguity and grittiness.
Well, and I think there's more of that in like straight like literary fiction and stuff, right? Like it's more about representing life maybe as it is or whatever.
Yes. So my favorite books when I was younger, and maybe still now, it's called A Slice of Life. I want to peek in, see what happens, and then I'm ready to step out, and I don't need any resolution. I just wanted to see part of it.
Wow.
No.
No, I'm definitely babies ever after. Like that's what I want. But this completely makes sense given what we write, right?
Yes.
Like we write to like what our preferences are. And that's the wonderful thing I think with indie publishing is that like now everyone like whatever you're looking for, I think you could find it.
Yes, the only issue is finding it. I think that's
Well,
discoverability is it's the thing it's the thing I dislike the most. Like last week I was like, I want to read a book with a heroine with low self-esteem. And then I'm like, I had to go on Facebook and into these groups and then not Google it, but like search in the search bar for people who looked for that. And then I found those from that specific group of people. So it is what it is. Like, but I'm not going to look at it on Amazon because who knows what I would get.
Well, Amazon is not, the search is but not very helpful.
No, but that's what it used to be, the point of it. But that's a different. So discoverability is an issue, but if you can find it, and people suggest books, and I write a list of 10, and then I look them all up, and usually borrow them from the library or buy them or whatever, and then systematically go through them to see if I can find the thing that I'm looking for at that moment, that experience I'm looking for at that moment. But it's interesting. So let me ask you this: where do you see your writing and books going in the future? Do you have a plan? I know none of us have a plan, but do you have a plan?
Yeah. I mean, I think, things are going well. So I kind of anticipate doing what I'm doing, which is writing in my world, probably releasing 2 books a year. I'll wrap up, in like the short term, I'm going to wrap up at least phase 1 of this series next year.
Okay.
Because so right now I'm writing, like a Charlie's Angels set in the Victorian era.
Right.
It's so much fun. So I'm releasing like book 4 and then book 5. And then I might take a break and go on to like another series. Although there's still some stories that I want to tell. So it might be like a phase 2 of this series. But yeah, it's kind of, my model it's working for me. So I think I'm going to continue doing that.
It totally makes sense. Grace Callaway, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me and discover that we don't have the same taste at all.
Like at all. Oh, it's awesome.
But I do appreciate that you're not a fan of birds. I'll just say that.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God.
I know.
Yeah, that's a whole nother hour-long talk. So.
I know. So thank you so much, Grace Callaway, for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. And I'm so looking forward to more books from you at the pace that you write them.
This is so fun. Like, seriously, thank you so much, Amy. I've enjoyed doing my first podcast ever with you.
Yay! So. I'm so excited. Thank you, Grace.
Thanks.
This has been A Time to Thrill with me, your host, author Aime Austin. If you enjoyed today's episode, I hope you'll share, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It will help others find and enjoy my conversations with brilliant creators. Also, please hit the subscribe or follow button on your podcast app. In addition to hosting this podcast, I am also the author of the Nicole Long series of legal thrillers. The first 2 books in the Nicole Long series are now live. You can download Outcry Witness and Major Crimes to your e-reader right now. The 3rd book in the new series, Without Consent, will be available in March 2023. In the meantime, you can pre-order it wherever you get your books. I am also the author of the Casey Court series of legal thrillers. These titles are available wherever books are sold, your local library, and also an audiobook. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Legal Thriller Author. You can also find this podcast on Facebook at A Time to Thrill. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with you soon with more great conversations.